You are watching the world 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. We've got an action-packed bulletin lined up for you. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. Another night of Pakistan ceasefire violations. The Pakistan Army violates ceasefire LOC for a seventh straight night. There are reports of small arms fire across the line of control. The Indian Army responds proportionately. Six days after Pakistan decided to shut its airspace to all flights owned and operated by Indian carriers, New Delhi has announced a reciprocal move by shutting down its airspace to all Pakistan-owned and operated planes. US Secretary Marco Rubio has spoken with External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar and Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif, in separate calls and urged both countries to de-escalate tensions. The United States has signed a much-anticipated natural resources deal with Ukraine, which the Treasury Department in the US said would help with its post-war reconstruction efforts. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberals fell short of winning an outright majority in Parliament a day after the party scored a stunning comeback victory in a vote widely seen as a rebuke of US President Donald Trump. Well, a big focus, yet another night of ceasefire violations from the Pakistan Army. You must note that India has responded proportionately. We have these details thanks to my colleague Shiv Arur, who's been tracking all the finer developments for us on ground zero. Small arms fire was reported across the line of control at Uri, Kupwara and Akhnur sectors. This as India has warned Pakistan against its unprovoked firings along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir, as the Directors General of Military Operations of two armies spoke on the hotline amid the escalating tensions over last week's deadly terror attack in Pahalgam. The development also came as Pakistan resorted to firing along the international border, as Shiv has been reporting. In fact, he's live with us at the moment. Let's just get in a quick update from Srinagar with Shiv Arur. Shiv, as you've been reporting, the Pakistan Army has violated ceasefire LOC for a seventh straight night now.
That is correct. Last night, Parmeshwar marks 1 full week of ceasefire violations. Last night's ceasefire violation, as our map shows, happened in Kupwara in North Kashmir, Uri in the central sectors of the LC, and Akhnur in the southern tip, which is basically in the Jammu division. Now, 1 week of ceasefire violations, despite warnings by India, despite retaliatory fire.
Right, we seem to have some trouble connecting with Shiv in Srinagar at the moment. In fact, I'm told Shiv is back with us. Shiv, it's over to you.
As our map shows, Parmeshwar, I hope our viewers can hear us. This was a ceasefire violation that marks 1 week of violations on the line of control. We do have information that the intensity of fire and duration has increased day on day, and last night was actually the heaviest, both in terms of rounds fired as well as duration of each ceasefire. As our map very clearly depicts, it happened in Kupwara in the northern parts of Kashmir, Uri in the central sectors of the LC, and Akhnur in the southern tip, which basically shows you that it was a full sweep of the J&K sectors. There is every possibility that the scope of this arc of hostilities might actually increase and expand northward. It might become heavier with heavier weapons employed. Like you rightly said, it comes 2 days after the officials, brigadier level officers of the Directorate General of Military Operations spoke over their hotline, as is routine. They do that every Tuesday. It's not specific to anything, whether there are ceasefire violations or not. But it also must be said, because there were reports that the DGMOs themselves had spoken over the hotline. I wanted to clarify that, Parmeshwar, that it was officials from the Directorate General of Military Operations. So it wasn't the DGMOs themselves,
right.
so not Lieutenant General rank officers who spoke, but Brigadier rank officers who got on the phone and talked about this. But it's important to note, obviously, that since that conversation, there have been 2 rounds of ceasefire violations, both on Tuesday night and then on Wednesday night once again. So clearly, this is an escalatory track, and it looks like it's going to continue.
Shiv, as always, thank you so much for joining us with the lowdown and the latest information. Meanwhile, US Secretary Marco Rubio has spoken with our External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar and Prime Minister of Pakistan Shehbaz Sharif in separate calls and urged both countries to de-escalate tensions. Mr. Rubio has also called on Pakistan to condemn the attack and cooperate with the ongoing investigation efforts. Meanwhile, US State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce stated that Marco Rubio had expressed his sorrow for the lives lost in the horrific terrorist attack in Pahalgam and had reaffirmed the United States' commitment to cooperation with India against terrorism. Well, let's turn our attention to the other big story we're tracking. The United States and Ukraine have signed an agreement to share profits and royalties from the future sale of Ukrainian minerals and rare earths, sealing a deal that Donald Trump has said will provide an economic incentive for the US to continue to invest in Ukraine's defense and its reconstruction after he brokers a peace deal with Russia. Now, this minerals deal that we're talking about, which has been the subject of tense negotiations for months and nearly fell through hours before it was signed, will establish a US-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund that the Trump administration has said will begin to repay an estimated $175 billion in aid provided to Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Ukrainian officials have divulged details of the agreement, which they portrayed as equitable and allowing Ukraine to maintain control over its natural resources. But Kate Fisher takes us through the finer details from Washington.
Well, this deal was meant to have been signed back in February when Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky came here to Washington, D.C. to meet US President Donald Trump in the Oval Office. And you may remember that meeting. It really got quite heated. Everybody got very angry and Volodymyr Zelensky was dismissed from the White House without anything being signed. After intense negotiations following that, it has now been signed here in Washington, D.C., with Ukraine's Minister of the Economy coming here to do so. Both she and the US Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, hailing this deal as beneficial for both countries. Scott Bessent saying that the US is committed to helping facilitate the end of this cruel and senseless war, and saying that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centred on a free, sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. Ukraine's Minister of the Economy saying that she believes that this deal reflects the United States' dedication to Ukraine's security, recovery and reconstruction. And that word security is key because, of course, the Ukrainians have been very keen to ensure that the US will continue to support them, to support their security. We don't know yet the details of this deal, but certainly there appears to be, the Ukrainians appear to believe that there will be some level of backing from the US when it comes to security. But essentially, this deal is based on the US having access to the proceeds of Ukraine's rare earth minerals, and in return, a joint US-Ukraine investment fund will be opened in Ukraine. Donald Trump has always described himself as a deal maker. He's been impatient about the fact that this deal has not yet been signed, so he will no doubt be pleased it finally has been inked, and he'll be hoping that it will help to move those peace talks along between Ukraine and Russia. Now this part is sorted out. He'll be hoping it gives impetus to those peace talks where there is yet to be agreement. Kate Fisher, NDTV, Washington.
Well, war may be fought with weapons, but peace, it seems, at least in this case, is being negotiated with minerals. At face value, many say it looks like a win-win deal. That's what it's being framed as well, by both officials on the US side and Ukraine's side. But the bigger question here, is it really a peace dividend or the start of a new geopolitical scramble for resources? That remains the big question. In fact, both the US and Ukraine have signed this agreement to share profits and royalties from the future sale of Ukrainian minerals and rare earths, sealing a deal that Donald Trump has said will provide an economic incentive for the US to continue to invest in Ukraine's defense and also its reconstruction after he brokers a peace deal with Russia. For further clarity, we have with us Richard Painter, law professor at the University of Minnesota Law School. As always, thank you so much for making time for us, Mr. Painter. Let's start with the heart of the matter. Is this minerals deal a peace-building strategy or a profit-sharing pretext? Many are questioning who stands to gain more here, whether it's Ukraine or whether it's America.
Well, we'll find out how this pans out, but nobody is going to gain at all here unless we can reach a peaceful resolution of the war between Russia and Ukraine, not just a temporary ceasefire, but permanent peace. There's no point having a mineral extraction deal in a war zone. So hopefully there's going to be a peace settlement, and we don't see that so far. That Vladimir Putin is willing to compromise much at all. He invaded Ukraine, has taken over quite a lot of territory, and I don't know whether he's willing to give it back. And if he's not, I think it's going to be awfully difficult to reach a peaceful resolution of the war. And I don't see how we could be focusing on mineral extraction or any value of mineral extraction in the middle of a war zone. So that's my concern about what's going on there.
We often hear about aid with strings attached. Would you argue this is the textbook definition? And if so, is Ukraine now paying for its freedom in minerals?
Well, I don't know that the mineral deal, the idea apparently now is going forward that there would be some sharing of the wealth from the minerals and exporting the minerals to the United States, and we'd pay for them, and then the money be used to rebuild Ukraine. I don't see the United States being willing to get involved itself militarily in defending Ukraine with our troops on the ground vis-a-vis Russia. So once again, my concern about this entire situation is that I don't see that there's a peace agreement or the prospect of a peace agreement, and I don't know why the United States government is focusing on the mineral extraction and without dealing with the peace issues first and negotiating with Vladimir Putin and getting Putin to understand that he needs to pull back and cooperate with other countries economically rather than flex military muscle in this way. So I do not see where this is going and how any progress at all has been made simply because there's a minerals deal.
Well, many argue that the peace deal is not yet formally on the radar. In fact, this fund split is 50-50 as far as face value is concerned, with equal voting rights. But many are questioning whether that really means equal power, or is it just diplomatic sugarcoating? But thank you so much, sir, for joining us on NDTV, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin has said President Vladimir Putin is open to peace in Ukraine, and intense work is going on with the United States. But here's the key part. They noted that the conflict, is what they call it, by the way, so they said it's so complicated that the rapid progress Washington wants is difficult to achieve. The Kremlin maintains that there is progress going on, but it's happening gradually. US President Donald Trump, who said he wants to be remembered as a peacemaker, has repeatedly made efforts to end the more than 3-year war in Ukraine, but many analysts are skeptical about the timeline for the same. In other news, Iran will hold talks in Rome on Friday with European parties to their now moribund 2015 nuclear deal, its foreign minister has confirmed, as both sides seek to position themselves ahead of a new round of US-Iranian negotiations that are happening over the weekend on Saturday. Now, as per reports on Monday, Tehran had proposed meeting Britain, France and Germany, collectively known as the E3, who stuck to the 2015 deal meant to curb Iran's nuclear activity, which unraveled in 2018 when Donald Trump walked out of it during his first term in the White House. Let's turn our attention to the other development we're tracking. The United Kingdom has launched airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen for the first time since US President Donald Trump returned to the White House. The Ministry of Defense said Royal Air Force Typhoon fighter jets working with the US hit a cluster of buildings used by the Houthis to manufacture attack drones. In fact, Houthi leaders said the UK should anticipate the consequences of its aggression. This is according to a latest statement published by the Houthi-run Al Masirah TV. With that, let's turn our attention now to the United States. The US economy shrank in the first quarter, new data shows, as consumer spending slowed and businesses rushed to import inventory to get ahead of US President Donald Trump's tariffs. The import surge is likely temporary, this is what some experts argue, and other macroeconomic data hinted at an economy that was vulnerable but not collapsing. But analysts broadly agree that economic damage could be substantial if Trump continues with his whipsaw tariff approach and if companies start laying off workers in the US. But what are the larger ramifications? And for further clarity, joining us on the broadcast at the moment, Mithali Nikore. Mithali, always a pleasure to have you on our show. As the US economy contracts, would you argue this is a Trump aftershock or a deeper tremor in the global system?
So, Parmeshwar, I'm actually quite intrigued by this data because this data has come in for Jan to March 2025. Yes. And the Trump tariffs were actually levied in April 2025. So this is almost, in a sense, what we're noticing is that consumer spending increased, and consumer spending increased a lot on imported items. There was an import surge simply because there was an expectation of tariffs. The fact that you're going to have tariffs that are going to be imposed in, say, an April or a May or a June, that prompted consumers to go ahead and increase their spending to such an extent that it actually reduced the size of the overall US economy by 0.3%, which actually prompted this reduction in the GDP. Was actually California wildfires, because we saw that the California wildfires were one of the major factors that are mentioned in the Bureau of Economic Affairs press release, which have actually reduced, the size of the GDP for the first time in 3 years. So I think there are a number of contributing factors, but the expectation of the tariffs and the fact that, things are going to become expensive, so let's buy it now, plus the wildfires combined created this impact and slowdown in the US economy.
Mithali, if the US keeps taxing imports and companies start laying off workers, are we looking at a global recession with a Made in America label? What are analysts saying?
I think we have been tracking this at Nikor Associates for a very long time and on your show, and it does seem likely that we will see a global slowdown. Now, whether that actually translates into a recession, that remains to be seen, because we have to see whether it actually dips down to less than 1% or less than 2% growth for 3 quarters at a stretch. But there's definitely a dampening of consumer sentiment. There's definitely a dampening of consumer sentiment in light of even the 10% tariff. And we still need to see what happens after the 90 days, what kind of deals are struck. So it, I think, depends a little bit on the negotiations that happen in the next 3 months.
We'll be keeping a close eye on all the latest developments with you, Mithali. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us. Meanwhile, investors, especially in the US, will be closely watching April's employment figures, which are out on Friday. Anything below 6 figures would indicate Trump's tariffs are hampering the economy faster than expected, as experts have highlighted. With that, we're slipping into a very quick break. Back in a moment with much more. Do stay tuned. Let's get you a quick update from the United Kingdom now. Voters are set to head to the polls for local and mayoral elections being held in some parts of England today. Now, there are local elections to 24 of England's 317 councils and 6 mayoral authorities. It is significant because it is the first big set of polls since Labour's landslide victory in last year's general election. In terms of what's at stake, 1,641 council seats across 23 local authorities, 4 regional mayor positions. There are 2 local mayor positions and a new MP for the constituency of Helsby and Runcorn. And in terms of the key issues, This is something we've been covering extensively on NDTV as well. The UK local election key issues include immigration, economy, as well as potholes and child grooming gangs, as well as the housing crisis. And with that, let's turn our attention to Canada now, where Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberals fell short of winning an outright majority in Parliament, a day after the party scored a stunning comeback victory in a vote widely seen as a rebuke of US President Donald Trump. But in a significant development, believe it or not, a record 22 of the 65 Punjabis in the federal poll fray have been elected to the House of Commons in Canada. This as Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party pulled off what many are calling an extraordinary comeback. We did a report on the 22 Punjabis in the Canadian House. Listen in.
Let's do everything we can to send a strong group of GTA Liberals to Ottawa to join
From Ludhiana's lanes to Canadian legislatures, the Punjabi footprint on Canada's political map is now bold, brazen, and bigger than ever before. In a record-breaking turn of events, 22 candidates of Punjabi origin have secured seats in Canada's House of Commons. Yes, 22. That's more than 6% of Canada's entire parliament now speaking, voting, and leading with Punjabi roots. And no, this isn't just a Brampton story anymore. Brampton, though, has always been Desi turf, but this time it's become a full-on political battleground. Let's just break it down for you. Ruby Sahota, who's a Liberal, trounced Amandeep Judge, a Conservative in Brampton North. Maninder Sidhu, a Liberal, beat Bob Dosanjh, a Conservative in Brampton East. Amandeep Sohi, a Liberal, outpaced Taran Chahal, a Conservative in Brampton Centre. But not all seats stayed red. Sukhdeep Kang, a Conservative, flipped Brampton South by defeating Sonia Sidhu, who's a Liberal. And in a big blow, Kamal Khera, the Liberal Health Minister, lost to Amarjeet Gill, a Conservative, in Brampton West. That's actually 5 out of 5 Brampton ridings with Punjabi names battling it out, and both parties walking away with wins and some with bruises. But let's just zoom out a bit though. Across the Canadian map, the who's who of Punjabi Canadian politics played a high-stakes game. Liberal heavyweights who held their front and their fort include Anita Anand from Oakville East. The former Innovation Minister isn't just a political brain, she's also one of the few Trudeau-era ministers to survive this wave. Bardesh Chagger from Waterloo, a veteran name, she's known for her work on diversity and inclusion. Meanwhile, Anju Dhillon, Sukh Dhaliwal, Randeep Sarai, Ikwinder Gaheen, Gurbakh Saini, Param Bains all secured wins for the Liberals across the board. In what may be the most dramatic twist of this election though, Jagmeet Singh, one of Canada's most recognised political figures and leader of the New Democratic Party, the NDP, lost from Burnaby Central. But not only did he lose, he finished third and subsequently resigned as NDP president. Now, for a man who made international headlines with his swagger, his turbans and TikToks, this is nothing short of a political earthquake. Let's not forget, this isn't just about Canada though. It's a mirror to the growing clout of the Indian diaspora, especially the Punjabi Sikh community, which now shapes policies in one of the world's most progressive democracies. Their success, therefore, is symbolic of migration, assimilation, and now domination, not just in business or culture, but in the very machinery of governance. Meanwhile, let's turn our attention now to Vietnam, which mounted its biggest ever celebration of the fall of Saigon on its 50th anniversary, including Chinese troops for the first time after Xi Jinping visited to portray Beijing as a more reliable partner than Washington. My colleague Uma Shankar reports from Ground Zero.
This is Ho Chi Minh city of southern Vietnam, and a grand parade has been conducted here. The entire top leadership, including the Prime Minister and the President of Vietnam, is present in it. This parade is being conducted on the completion of 50 years of Vietnam unification. Lakhs of people from all across the Vietnam have come to witness this parade. Along with the parade, a fly past is also being conducted. This is an occasion to showcase the victory of this country in the Vietnam War. Ho Chi Minh City is historically known as Saigon, with the capture of Saigon on 30th April 1975. In this very city, the government of southern Vietnam surrendered in front of northern Vietnam, and the Vietnam War ended. Lakhs of Vietnamese trapped here were freed, and Vietnam was reunified. Before moving ahead, let us look at the history bit. On 19th and 30th April 1975, an operation was conducted in Saigon of South Vietnam, which was named Operation Frequent Wind. Under this operation, American citizens and soldiers were freed from Saigon, whose number was about 7,000. Helicopters were used to evacuate them. It's a very memorable picture in the history of Vietnam War. Only after 30th April 1975, the formal process of reunification of Vietnam under the control of North Vietnam began. On 2nd July 1976, this country was unified as Socialist Republic of Vietnam under the communist rule. On the occasion of completion of 50 years of this historic day, Ho Chi Minh is in a different kind of enthusiasm. Ho Chi Minh Communist Union Central Committee, along with other agencies, has been launched a campaign named Hoa Bin Dep Lam. It means peace is beautiful. Vietnam people have shared various content from videos to photos under this campaign on their social media platforms. The purpose is to show their loyalty and the pride towards the Vietnam. Many types of programs have been also organized on this occasion. Laos, China and Cambodia were the countries that helped Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Therefore, the military contingents of these three countries are also participating in this parade on the occasion of 50th anniversary.
And finally, Blake Lively actually turned heads in a Rahul Mishra creation at a New York City premiere of Another Simple Favor. In fact, the high-waist number featured floral applique work that is now the talk of the town, we're given to understand, and adding to the boldness were the structured sites that you can see on your screens at the moment. As always, thank you so much for investing your time in watching this edition of The World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest for you. Do stay tuned.